Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The new administration has a responsibility to try to find a way of extending the New START treaty. Obviously, both countries have bloated nuclear arsenals. President Trump is saying he wouldn't mind a nuclear arms race with Russia, or that Saudi Arabia, South Korea, Japan have nuclear weapons programs. It's a dangerous environment that could be created if we just allow for that kind of rhetoric to continue. So my question to you, let me begin with you, Ms. Smith, would be, what is the best way that President Trump can move to pursue serious nuclear arms control negotiations with Russia while strengthening the NATO regime and resisting Russian aggression? How can we square that circle?
Thank you for that, Senator. I would just open by saying, the goal of limiting the modernization plans on both sides to try and save money and stabilize the nuclear balance is a laudable one, and it's a good idea that I think many of us would support. But I think we have to be very careful how we proceed. And I think the best way to proceed would be kind of the crawl, walk, run. And the crawl, walk, run approach starts with pushing Russia to clean up their act when it comes to the INF Treaty. So they are in violation of the INF Treaty. And I think before we have any conversations with them about something above and beyond New START, something that would take an entirely new shape, we have to focus on what they're in violation of today. So that's point number one. Two, the extent that we want to move forward with a dialogue in this space, again, a laudable goal, we have to basically take the trust or distrust and verify approach. I mean, Putin has shown in many, many situations, whether it's Syria or all sorts of other environments where, you're sitting down with him and he promises you the moon, and a day or two later, it's a very different story in terms of implementation. He has done this in Ukraine and Syria.
So if I may, so from your perspective then, should Trump meet first with NATO before he meets with Putin in order to be reassuring our allies that we are going to be backing them on the INF negotiations, and that we're firmly behind that perspective to ensure that Putin understands that there's a united stance that exists on the enforcement of the integrity of the pre-existing nuclear agreements. Would you say that would be a wiser approach for President Trump to take, to meet with NATO first?
100% agreement, that's the right approach. Consult with Europe first, then move to a dialogue with Russia, and do not include sanctions as part of your opening move.
Do you agree with that?
Senator, I'm sorry, it's kind of what I said in my opening remarks. I do believe that it is important for our new president to meet with our allies before he meets with Mr. Putin. And I would like to echo I share your concerns about other nuclear discussions and things, but my focus as the SACEUR and the European Command Commander was on the fact that Russia has abrogated the INF, and what does that mean to us tactically?
Okay, that's very important. Well, how can we bring Russia back into compliance with INF without further raising nuclear tensions in Europe? What's the best approach that you would recommend?
I think we should share this when I'll speak a little more militarily, and Julie might speak in a policy manner. As far as the INF, the way we got to the INF was confronting a situation where the Russians were presenting a tough and ugly problem. And so I do believe that in order to get back to the INF, we may have to take some tough and more deliberate actions. I think we've got an incredible team in the Pentagon now between our new secretary and Joe Dunford. I've worked with both of these gentlemen and for them in my life. I think they will come with a framework for getting to this, but until that time, I still ascribe to the framework that Ash Carter put out there. And I think that we just haven't started down the path of what Ash Carter laid out. And so I very much ascribe to his deploy active defense, counterforce capabilities, and then countervailing strike capabilities as a stepping stone to try to bring pressure on the INF.
Okay, so we have the military perspective. Can we get the policy perspective?
Oh, I mean, I would absolutely agree with that. I mean, frankly, I have nothing to add. I think that's exactly the right approach. I support what Ash Carter put on the table, and I certainly, as noted earlier, support ensuring that we bring our European allies along in this process.
Yeah, 'cause my fear is that if we don't try to find a peaceful but aggressive way of responding, then we just play into the hands of the military and the complex in Russia, and to a certain extent our own military complex here, to just want to have $1 trillion worth of nuclear buildup. It's in their economic interests. It's in their own personal political interests, because that makes them more powerful within the society. So the more that we can use this negotiated resolution is the more we can avoid squandering, as we did in the 80s, just so much more money than we had to, because we weren't willing to kind of get to the table and try to be reasonable but firm in reaching a result that would help us on all fronts. And then you can move on with Russia, that was the key issue that then led to the fall of the Berlin Wall. You first had to resolve this nuclear conflict. And without that, all the other regional conflicts, all the proxy wars, all were just going to continue. So that was the central issue, and I think it still continues to be to a very large extent. The more that we talk about this offensive, defensive technology deployment that just plays into the hands of the most conservative elements in their country. So we thank you for your testimony. We thank you.